There's a moment in the Bible that has puzzled Christians for centuries. In Luke chapter 4, Satan takes Jesus up on a high place and shows him all the kingdoms of the world. And then Satan makes a shocking claim. He says, "To you I will give you all this authority and their glory, for it has been delivered to me, and I will give it to whom I will." Luke 4:6. In other words, Satan claims that the kingdoms of the world belong to him. And here's the surprising part. Jesus doesn't call him a liar. He doesn't say, "That's not true." Instead, Jesus responds by quoting scripture and refusing to worship him, which I would hope he did that. The question becomes, why didn't Jesus challenge Satan's claim? Did Satan actually have authority over the world at that moment? Today, we're going to explore a fascinating explanation that Josh Howerton shared on the Live Free channel. Josh does an excellent job walking through this mystery, and I wanted to react to a few of his insights while connecting them to something we talk about on our channel often: real estate. Real estate, period. Because believe it or not, the Bible actually explains this story using the language of ownership, inheritance, and title, deeds, right? All that stuff that you learn about in real estate school. If we haven't met, I'm Albert Huizing V. I help people buy, sell, and invest in real estate here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. But I also love exploring how the Bible speaks into real life topics like land, stewardship, and redemption. So let's unpack what's really happening in Luke chapter 4. All right, we're going to show a little clip of Josh here explaining the temptation of Jesus, and then we're kind of going to go in it. So we'll let him go.
Let me answer a super theology nerd interesting question. Okay. Jana Howerton, why is it that when Satan tempts Jesus, he offers him all the kingdoms of the world, and instead of Jesus saying, because he says in Luke 4, "For they have been delivered to me," Satan says, God is the one who created the world. So dominion of this earth was originally our Father's, and it stayed in his family, the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. God has original dominion. He passes dominion of earth to Adam and Eve. When he passed it, now I'm coming back to this. You may be like, what's he talking about? I'm coming back to this. He passes dominion to them, but God keeps the sealed deed because the world,
it's good.
It all.
So God is the original deed holder. Before we even talk about Satan's claim, the Bible tells us something foundational about ownership. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, and the world and all who live in it are his." God is the original owner of creation.
You got to back up to the book of Jeremiah. It says a crazy answer. So the key to understanding this, I think, is if you go back to Jeremiah 32, there's a very interesting, and it's an odd passage about Jeremiah and a guy named Hanamel. So this is right before Israel goes into captivity in Babylon. Jeremiah 32, starting in verse 6. Jeremiah said, "The word of the Lord came to me. Behold, Hanamel, the son of Shallum, your uncle, will come to you and say, buy my field that is at Anathoth for the," and this is really important, "the right of redemption by purchase is yours." Then verse 8 says, "Then Hanamel, my cousin, came to me in the court of the garden in accordance with the word of the Lord and said to me, buy my field that is at Anathoth." So basically what God prophesied would happen is happening. "Buy my field that's at Anathoth in the land of Benjamin for the right of inheritance." It's acknowledged there's a right of redemption, and then there's a right of inheritance. "Then I knew that this was the word of the Lord." Now, verse 9. "And I bought the field at Anathoth from Hanamel, my cousin, and weighed out the money, 17 shekels of silver. I signed the deed, sealed it, got witnesses, and weighed the money on scales."
Real estate language, you could say that God holds the ultimate title deed to the earth. Another verse that reinforces this idea would be Leviticus 25:23, which says, "The land must not be sold permanently because the land is mine and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. Think about if we lived in the same way as the Old Testament, where we're just like, hey, we're foreigners and we're strangers. And every couple of years we go, hey, we just got to sell this land back, give it away. Even in ancient Israel, where families owned land, God reminded them that the land ultimately belonged to him. Remember, we're stewards. We manage what God has given us. We don't own it. Human beings, we're not the absolute owners. We are stewards living on God's land. That idea becomes incredibly important when we look at what happened in Genesis. So we're going to go dive into Genesis. The dominion given to humanity in Genesis chapter 1, God gives authority to Adam, Eve over the earth. It says in Genesis 1:28, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air. Humanity was given dominion over creation. Pretty clear. Put it up on the screen as well, so that's good. Psalm 115:16 echoes this idea. The highest heavens belong to the Lord, but the earth he has given to mankind. So we have a clear picture. God owns the earth, but he entrusts its stewardship to humanity. Adam and Eve were given authority to govern creation under God. But something changed in Genesis 3, the fall, Adam forfeiture. When Adam and Eve sinned, they didn't just break a rule. They surrendered their authority. And so there's many theologians described this moment as Adam's forfeiture. Humanity handed over its stewardship to the earth to the enemy, which is Satan. This helps explain why the New Testament sometimes refers to Satan as the God of this world, 2 Corinthians 4:4, the ruler of this world, John 12:31, not because God lost ownership, but because humanity surrendered the authority it had been given. So when Satan tells Jesus in Luke 4 that the kingdom of the world has been delivered to him, he is referring to that moment in human history. But like Josh said, the story doesn't end there. The real estate clue in Jeremiah that Josh alluded to in his video is where it really gets fascinating. There is a seemingly ordinary real estate transaction in the book of Jeremiah that gives us a clue about how redemption works. So Jeremiah chapter 32, the prophet Jeremiah purchases a piece of land, and during the transaction, something very unusual happens. 2 copies of the deed are created. Jeremiah 32:10 through 11 says, I signed and sealed the deed, and it had witnessed and weighed out the silver on the scales. I took the sealed deed of purchase containing the terms and conditions, as well as the unsealed copies. In ancient Israel, property transactions often included 2 deeds, a sealed scroll and an open scroll. Josh talks about this in his video a little bit. I'm going to kind of reiterate a little bit. The open scroll contained a visible terms of agreement. The sealed scroll served as a protected title deed which could only be opened by the rightful redeemer. Jeremiah then instructs the deeds to be stored carefully. Now we're going to go into verse 14. Put these deeds in a jar, a clay jar, so that they will last a long time. Why? Because one day the land would be redeemed and restored. It's kind of cool. It's like clay jar. We're made from clay. I'm gonna insert the script or the video about Josh explaining the 2 deed scroll system probably way better than I can. Then I want to kind of go into the kinsman redeemer.
Verse 11, then I took the sealed deed, it says, of purchase containing the terms and conditions, and the open copy. So in ancient Israel culture, there were 2 copies of a deed, a sealed deed and an open deed. And then verse 12, and I gave the deed of purchase to Baruch, the son of Neriah, in the presence of Hanamel, my cousin.
This legal system connected to Boaz and Ruth, and in Israelite law, if the land is lost, a close relative can step in and redeem it. This person is called a kinsman redeemer, and they had to meet 3 different requirements. They had to be a relative, able to pay the redemption price, and willing to redeem the property. So Boaz fulfilled this role for Naomi's family, but the story foreshadows something like even bigger, which is this like sealed scroll in Revelations. So in Revelation chapter 5, John describes a scroll that's sealed with 7 seals. And heavens begin to search for someone who's worthy of opening. John gets sad. He's like, no one can open it. Revelations 5:4 says, I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll. Why would heaven react this way? Because the scroll appears to represent the title deed to the earth, legal right to redeem creation. Then suddenly someone steps forward, like Josh says.
And whenever they're going, who's worthy to take the scroll and break its seal? And then everybody goes, the Lamb who was slain is the only
so
one
good.
that was found worthy. Oh my gosh.
So good. That's so good.
To open the scroll. And what's happening in Revelation chapter 5 is you're getting a vision.
Okay, so let's go into the Logos Bible app. Logos is awesome. It's like Ruslan KD uses it. Revelations 5:9, and says, worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain. By your blood you ransom people for God, for every tribe and language and people of the nation. So here we go. Axios. Worthy, deserving, fitting, worthwhile, proper, worthy, deserving, to way of, bear, befitting, me.
Axios.
Okay, so axios, to be worthy, deserving. Yeah, just awesome, cool stuff of how many times it says it in the Bible. Considered worthy, worthily considered worthy. And then there's the antonyms, or the, the opposites of it. So there's example uses in here, but basically why God was worthy of the scroll is because he suffered on the cross and he became a little bit lower than the heavenly beings or the angelic beings, like it talks about in Hebrews 2. And so the Lamb, Jesus Christ, Revelations 5:9, you are worthy because you were slain, and your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. Jesus becomes the ultimate redeemer. So why Jesus had to become human? Now go into like the differences between what a title and a deed is, right? Like, because there were 2 deeds, right? And we talked about these 2 scrolls already. This matters so much. Why the incarnation matters. The Redeemer has to be a kinsman. He has to be a relative, someone from a human family. It can't be just like God comes down. And Jesus became human so he could legally redeem what humanity had lost. And unlike Adam, Jesus lived without sin, which means he was qualified to pay the redemption price. All right, let's slow this down because this is where it gets pretty powerful. When we talk about a title and a deed, we're talking about ownership, but not just ownership, how ownership is proven and transferred. In today's world, we usually separate these 2 ideas. Okay? A title is the legal right of ownership. It's invisible. It's an invisible reality that says this belongs to you. Okay? And a deed is the physical document that proves that ownership and shows you how it was transferred. Here's where it gets interesting, for sure. This is all interesting, learning about deeds and titles. They're in the Bible, they're in today's day. So in modern real estate, there's actually 2 kinds of titles and 2 kinds of deeds. We deal with this all the time. You have what's called legal title and equitable title. Legal title is who officially holds ownership on paper, whose name is recorded. And then equitable title is who actually has the right to benefit from the property, who gets to use it, profit from it, live in it. For example, when a buyer goes under contract on a house, they don't have legal title yet, but they do have equitable title. They have a claim to it. They're stepping into ownership before it's fully completed, fully theirs. Okay. Now, on the deed side of things, we see something similar. There are open deeds and sealed deeds, or in today's terms, you could think of it as them like recorded versus restricted documents. Yeah, that's what we'll go with that. An open deed is public, visible, accessible. You can go down to the county and see it. It's been fully transferred and recognized. But a sealed deed is different. A sealed deed represents something that is owned but not yet fully revealed or claimed. It's protected. It requires the right person with the right authority to open it and complete the transfer. Now, here is why this matters. In biblical times, especially in Jeremiah and Revelation, and we talked about those, they didn't just write one deed, they wrote 2 copies. One was left open for the public record, and Josh talks about this in his video as well, was sealed, preserved, protected, and only opened under the right conditions, usually by a kinsman redeemer. So when you get to Revelations 5 and you see a sealed scroll, we're seeing all of these different hints of not this random imagery. This is a title deed, a legal document of ownership. And the question isn't just who wants it. The question is who has the right to open it and take back what was lost. Because ownership in the kingdom of God isn't just claimed, it's redeemed. 1 Corinthians 6:20 says, "You were bought with a price. The cross becomes the moment where the price of redemption is paid." And I want to kind of talk about this a little bit, because most times God coming down, for whatever reason, it's called archetypical and ectypical understanding. Archetypical is divine, God's understanding, and ectypical is what God has revealed to humans. And there is just so many different things that I cannot wrap my head around. Why doesn't God just be boom, I'm gonna fix this with just being God, right? He is a God of order and a God of justice. I think it's really cool how God is so all-knowing and just utilizes the order and perfection of his ultimate power to carry out this plan to save us for what we have done wrong. I just thought that was really cool. Getting to the authority restored. After the resurrection, Jesus makes a powerful statement. Matthew 28:18 says, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me." The rightful king has reclaimed the authority that humanity surrendered. The Redeemer has opened the sealed deed, is basically what he is saying. Why does this matter? When you step back and look at the Bible, tells a remarkable story. God is the original owner of creation. Humanity was entrusted with stewardship. That stewardship was forfeited through sin, and Jesus becomes the Redeemer who buys back what was lost. From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible is telling the story of redemption and restoration. So, why didn't Jesus call Satan a liar in Luke chapter 4? Because Satan had temporary authority over the kingdoms of the world, but that authority was never permanent. Through the cross and resurrection, Jesus became the ultimate Redeemer, the one worthy to open the scroll, the one who reclaimed the title. And one day, the kingdom of the world will fully belong to him again. Obviously, that's why it says it in Revelations. So, if you enjoyed me just rambling on with this conversation where faith intersects into the real estate world, make sure hit that subscribe channel. We talk about on this channel faith, stewardship, real estate, and how the Bible speaks in a way that we can live today. And we look at the Sioux Falls community. Thanks for being here. And Lord willingly, we'll see you next week.